The spaceship landed softly on the crystal platform. Kung Teho looked through the window and saw a world that did not look real. The buildings were tall and made of glass that changed colors in the light. The sky was purple, and 2 suns hung low on the horizon. He had traveled for 6 months to reach this place. Now he was finally here. Valora Prime, the heart of the greatest empire in the known galaxy. Teho was 32 years old. He had spent 10 years in the Korean military before becoming a diplomat. He had seen war. He had seen peace. He had negotiated with enemies and friends. But nothing had prepared him for this mission. Earth needed allies. Humanity had only discovered faster than light travel 5 years ago. They were babies in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. The Valoran Empire was the most powerful of them all. They controlled 1,000 worlds. Their technology was beyond anything humans could imagine, and they had agreed to meet with Earth. But there was a condition. The Valorans believed in unity through blood. Their alliances were not made with paper and signatures. They were made with marriage. And so, to secure Earth's place in the Galactic Accord, a human would have to marry their ruler. Empress Lyris. Teho had seen pictures of her. She was beautiful in a way that was hard to describe. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow softly. Her eyes were large and silver, like 2 moons. She was tall, almost 7 feet, and moved with the grace of water. The Valorans were an elegant species. They valued beauty, strength, and power above all else, and they thought humans were nothing. Teho understood this. He had read the reports. To the Valorans, humans were primitive creatures from a small, violent world. They were short. They were weak. They died easily. Their technology was crude. Their history was filled with war and destruction. The Valorans allowed this marriage only because they found it amusing. A human husband for their Empress? Pet. A joke. But Teho did not care what they thought. He had a mission. He would complete it. The door of the spaceship opened, and he stepped outside. The air was thin and sweet. The gravity was lighter than Earth. He felt like he could jump 10 feet high. Around him, Valoran guards stood in perfect lines. They wore silver armor that reflected the twin suns. Their faces showed no emotion, but their eyes followed him with clear disdain. A tall Valoran walked toward him. He wore a dark uniform covered in medals and symbols. His face was hard and cold. "I am High General Drex," he said. His voice was deep and sharp. "I am here to escort you to the palace. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. Do not embarrass yourself more than your presence already does." Teho looked at him calmly. "Thank you for the warm welcome, General." Drex's eyes narrowed. He did not like this human. That was clear. But he said nothing more. He turned and walked toward a floating vehicle. Teho followed. The journey to the palace took an hour. Teho watched the city pass by. Everything was clean and perfect. The streets were wide and empty of dirt. The people moved with purpose and grace. There were no cars or machines making noise. Everything floated silently on invisible energy. It was beautiful. It was also cold. There was no laughter, no music, no chaos. It was a world of order and control. The palace rose from the center of the city like a mountain of crystal. It was the largest building Teho had ever seen. Its towers reached into the purple sky. Its walls shimmered with 1,000 colors. Guards stood at every entrance. Servants moved like shadows through the halls. Teho was led through endless corridors. The floors were so polished he could see his reflection. The walls were decorated with images of Valoran history. Great battles. Powerful rulers. Conquered worlds. The Valorans were proud of their strength. They had never lost a war. They had never known defeat. Finally, they reached a massive door made of gold and crystal. It opened slowly, revealing a throne room that took Teo's breath away. The ceiling was so high, it disappeared into darkness. Pillars of light rose from the floor, and at the far end, on a throne that seemed to float in the air, sat Empress Lyris. She was more beautiful in person than any picture could show. Her silver eyes watched him approach. Her blue skin glowed softly in the light. She wore a dress made of something that looked like liquid starlight. A crown of crystal sat on her head. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply watched. Taeho stopped at the proper distance and bowed deeply. Your Imperial Majesty, I am Kang Taeho, representative of United Earth. I am honored to meet you. A silence filled the room. The Empress studied him like a scientist studying an insect. So she finally said. Her voice was soft but carried through the entire hall. This is what Earth sends me. A small, soft creature with strange eyes and brown skin. Taeho straightened. I am what I am, Your Majesty, indeed. She tilted her head slightly. I agreed to this marriage because your planet begged for protection. Your species is young and weak. You have enemies you do not even know about. Without our help, your Earth will be dust within a century. We are grateful for your protection, Taeho said carefully. Grateful. She tested the word like it tasted strange. Tell me, human, what can you offer me? What can your species possibly give to the Valoran Empire? Taeho thought for a moment. Around him, he could feel the eyes of courtiers and generals watching, waiting for him to fail, waiting to laugh. Hope, he said simply. The Empress blinked. Hope? Humans have nothing else, Taeho continued. We are not strong like Valorans. We do not live long. We do not have great technology, but we have survived everything our universe has thrown at us. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. We should have died 1,000 times, but we are still here because we never stop hoping. We never stop fighting. The room was silent. The Empress stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but it was not kind either. It was the laugh of someone who had heard a child say something foolish but amusing. Hope, she repeated. How charming. He waved her hand dismissively. Take him to his chambers. We will complete the marriage ceremony tomorrow. After that, he can stay out of my way. Taeho was led away. Behind him, he heard the courtiers whispering and laughing. The small human with his big words about hope. How amusing. How pathetic. But Taeho did not mind. He had learned long ago that people often laughed at things they did not understand. The Valorans saw him as weak. They saw humanity as a joke. That was fine. Underestimation was a weapon too. He reached his chambers. They were large and beautiful, but he knew they were also a cage. He was alone on an alien world, married to an empress who despised him, surrounded by people who wanted him gone, but he was still standing. He was still breathing. And as long as that was true, he had a chance. Tomorrow, his new life would begin. He did not know what it would bring, but he was ready. He had been ready his whole life. The wedding ceremony was short and cold. Taeho stood beside Empress Lyris in the Great Temple while priests spoke words in the ancient Valoran language. There were no smiles. No celebration. The Empress did not look at him once. When it was done, she left without a word. Taeho was now officially the Emperor Consort of the Valoran Empire, but he was also the loneliest man in the galaxy. Days turned into weeks. Taeho learned quickly that his title meant nothing. He had no power, no duties, no purpose. He was decoration, a symbol of an alliance that nobody wanted. The courtiers ignored him when he walked through the halls. The servants were polite but distant. The guards watched him like he was a prisoner, not a prince. Only one person treated him with kindness. Her name was Mira. She was a young Valoran servant assigned to his chambers. She had soft green skin and kind eyes. Unlike the others, she did not look at him with disgust. You are different from what I expected, she told him one morning while bringing his food. Different how? Taeho asked. The stories say humans are loud and violent, but you are quiet. You read books. You walk in the gardens. You seem peaceful. Taeho smiled. We can be loud and violent, but we can also be peaceful. Humans are complicated. Mira nodded slowly. I think I understand. We Valorans are not complicated. We are raised to be one thing. Strong, proud, perfect. There is no room for anything else. Taeho thought about this often. The Valorans were powerful, yes, but they were also rigid. They could not adapt. They could not change. Everything was tradition and honor and strength. There was no flexibility, no creativity, and that, Taeho realized, might be their weakness. He spent his days exploring the palace. Nobody stopped him. Nobody cared where he went. He visited the libraries and read about Valoran history. He walked through the training grounds and watched the soldiers practice. He observed everything and remembered everything. The soldiers were impressive. They were fast and strong. They could lift heavy weights without effort. They could run for hours without stopping. But Taeho noticed something interesting. They trained in perfect conditions. The temperature was always comfortable. The ground was always flat and smooth. The weather was always clear. They never practiced in rain or cold or heat. On Earth, Taeho had trained in the mountains during winter. He had marched through mud and snow. He had slept in frozen trenches. He had pushed his body past its limits again and again. That was how humans were made. Through suffering. Through struggle. Through pain, the Valorans had never needed to suffer. Their world was gentle. Their bodies were strong. They had conquered Isley and lived in comfort. They did not know what it meant to truly fight for survival. One night, Taeho received a message from Captain Yunhan. She was his oldest friend. They had served together in the military years ago. Now she worked at the Earth Embassy on Valora Prime. "Be careful," her message said. "Hi, General Drex is planning something. He hates you. He hates the Alliance. My sources say he is looking for a way to destroy you without starting a war." Taeho read the message 3 times before deleting it. He was not surprised. He had seen the way Drex looked at him. There was murder in those silver eyes. It was only a matter of time before the general made his move. The next evening, Taeho was summoned to dinner with the Empress. It was the first time she had invited him since the wedding. He dressed carefully and walked to her private dining room. She was already seated when he arrived. The table was covered with strange and beautiful food. Everything glowed and shimmered with colors he had never seen. The Empress watched him sit down with her usual cold expression. "You have been exploring my palace," she said. It was not a question. "I have," Taeho admitted. "There is much to learn here." "Learning?" She raised an eyebrow. "What could a human possibly learn from us that would matter?" Taeho took a bite of something that tasted like sweet fruit and fire. "I learned that your soldiers never train in bad weather. I learned that your buildings have no stairs, only floating platforms. I learned that your people have not fought a real war in 300 years. The Empress's eyes narrowed. "You think we are weak?" "No," Taeho said carefully. "I think you are strong in ways that are easy. I wonder if you are strong in ways that are hard." Silence stretched between them. For a moment, Taeho thought she would call the guards and have him thrown out. But instead, something strange happened. A tiny crack appeared in her cold mask. For just a second, she looked almost curious. "You are brave," she said slowly, "or stupid. I cannot decide which." "Perhaps both," Taeho replied. The dinner continued in silence. But something had changed. The Empress kept glancing at him when she thought he was not looking. He had surprised her. That was good. It was the first step. After dinner, Taeho returned to his chambers. Mira was waiting with a worried expression. "The general visited while you were gone," she whispered. "He asked questions about your routine, where you go, what you do." "I did not tell him much, but I am scared." Taeho nodded. "Thank you for warning me, Myra. You are a good friend." She looked at him with wide eyes. "Friend, I am just a servant. On Earth, kindness is not about rank. You have been kind to me. That makes you my friend." Myra did not seem to know how to respond. She bowed quickly and left. But Taeho saw the small smile on her face. That night, he lay in bed and thought about what was coming. Drex would make his move soon. The general was too proud and too angry to wait long. And when that happened, Taeho would need to be ready. He thought about Earth, about his family, about the mountains where he used to train. He remembered the cold that cut through his clothes. the exhaustion that made every step feel impossible, the voice in his head that begged him to stop, to rest, to give up. He had never listened to that voice. The Valorans thought humans were weak because their bodies were soft. They did not understand that human strength was not in muscles or bones. It was in something else, something deeper. The will to keep going when everything said stop. The refusal to die when death was easier than living. The Valorans had never needed that kind of strength. They had never been tested. Tejo closed his eyes and smiled in the darkness. If Drex wanted to test him, then fine. Let him try. The general had no idea what he was dealing with. None of them did. Humans had crawled out of caves and conquered their entire planet. They had survived ice and fire, disease and war, famine and flood. They had looked at every challenge the universe threw at them and said the same thing every time: we will not break. And tomorrow, Tejo would remind the Valorans why humans were still standing when so many other species had fallen. He slept deeply that night. The sleep of a soldier before battle, calm, ready, unafraid. The invitation came on a bright morning. High General Drex stood at Tejo's door with a smile that looked like a knife. He announced that there would be a ceremonial hunt in the wild mountains. As Emperor Consort, Tejo was expected to attend. It was tradition. An honor Te-Ho knew it was a trap, but he also knew he could not refuse. If he showed fear, the alliance would suffer. Earth would look weak. So he nodded and said he would be happy to join. The mountains of Valora were not like the mountains of Earth. They rose higher than any peaks Tejo had ever seen. Their tops were lost in clouds. Their slopes were covered in strange blue plants that glowed in the darkness. The air was thin and cold. Snow covered everything. 50 Valoran soldiers joined the hunt. They rode on flying creatures that looked like giant silver birds. Tejo was given one too. He had never ridden such a beast, but he learned quickly. The creature responded to his touch better than he expected. The hunt lasted for hours. They chased a massive animal through the forests. Tejo watched and stayed quiet. He noticed that the soldiers seemed uncomfortable in the cold. They kept adjusting their armor. Their movements became slower as the temperature dropped. Finally, they made camp in a valley between two frozen peaks. Tents were set up. Fires were lit. Food was prepared. Tejo sat alone at the edge of the camp. Nobody spoke to him. That was fine. He used the time to study the terrain. That night, Drex came to his tent. "Tomorrow, we will go deeper into the mountains," the general said. "There is a sacred beast that lives in the highest caves. Killing it is a great honor. You will lead the hunt." Tejo met his eyes. "I am not a skilled hunter." "Then this will be a learning experience." Drex smiled. "Do not worry. My soldiers will protect you." But when morning came, Tejo woke up alone. The camp was gone. The tents, the soldiers, the flying creatures. Everything had disappeared. Only his own tent remained, along with a small pack of supplies. He was alone in the frozen mountains. He was supposed to die here. Tejo stepped outside and looked at the empty valley. Snow fell from the gray sky. The wind howled between the peaks. The temperature was far below freezing. Any Valoran would die within hours in these conditions. Their bodies were not built for extreme cold. Their blood moved too slowly. Their skin was too thin. But Tejo was not Valoran. He checked his supplies. A small knife. Some dried food. A thin blanket. Water that was already turning to ice. It was not much, but it was enough. He had survived with less. He started walking. The first day was hard. The snow was deep and the wind was strong. Every step was a battle. His lungs burned from the thin, cold air. His fingers and toes grew numb, but he kept moving. He found a cave before nightfall and built a small fire using dried plants and his knife. He ate a little food and drank melted snow. Then he slept, wrapped in his thin blanket, listening to the wind scream outside. The second day was harder. His body ached from the cold and the walking. The food was almost gone. The terrain became steeper and more dangerous. He fell twice and cut his hands on sharp rocks. Blood froze on his skin, but he kept moving. On the afternoon of the second day, he found something unexpected. A Valoran soldier lay in the snow, unconscious and barely breathing. He was young, probably not even 20 years old. His silver armor was cracked. His blue skin had turned dark from the cold. Taeho recognized the situation immediately. The soldier had been left behind, just like him. Perhaps he had been injured during the retreat. Perhaps Drex had considered him expendable. Either way, he was dying. Taeho could have walked away. The soldier was heavy, and carrying him would slow everything down. Saving him might mean death for both of them. But that was not who Taeho was. He lifted the soldier onto his back and continued walking. The third day was the hardest thing Taeho had ever done. The soldier weighed more than him. The path grew steeper. The cold grew worse. His body screamed for rest. His mind begged him to stop, but he kept moving. He talked to the unconscious soldier as he walked. He told him about Earth, about the mountains of Korea, about his family and his friends, about the first time he saw snow as a child, about the military training that had taught him to never give up. The soldier could not hear him, but Taeho needed to talk. It kept him sane. It kept him moving. On the evening of the third day, he saw lights in the distance. A search party. They had finally come looking. Taeho walked toward the lights. His legs were shaking. His vision was blurry. He could barely feel his body anymore. But he walked out. One step. Then another. Then another. When the search party found him, they could not believe what they saw. The human was supposed to be dead. Instead, he was walking calmly toward them, carrying a Valoran soldier on his back. He was covered in blood and ice. His clothes were torn. His face was red from the cold. But he was alive. He needs medical attention, Taeho said, handing the soldier to the shocked rescuers. His core temperature dropped too low. Warm him slowly, or his heart will stop. Then Taeho collapsed. He woke up in the palace medical center. Machines beeped around him. His body was wrapped in warm blankets. A Valoran doctor stood beside his bed, looking at him with an expression he could not read. "You should be dead," the doctor said. "No species in our records can survive 3 days in those mountains. The cold alone should have killed you. And you were carrying another person. It is not possible." Taeho smiled weakly. "I am human. We are good at doing impossible things." The news spread quickly through the palace. The human had survived. The human had saved a Valoran soldier. The human had walked out of the frozen mountains when their own warriors would have died. Empress. Lyris watched the footage from the search party's cameras. She watched Taeho walk through the snow with a soldier on his back. She watched him hand over the soldier and give medical advice. She watched him collapse from exhaustion after pushing his body beyond all limits. For a long time, she said nothing. Her advisors waited nervously. Finally, she spoke. "Bring me everything we have on humans. Their history, their biology, their wars, everything." She looked at the frozen image of Taeho walking through the snow. "I want to understand how this is possible." For the first time since he arrived, Empress Lyris was not looking at Kong Taeho with disgust or amusement. She was looking at him with something new. Respect. The palace was full of whispers. Everyone was talking about the human who survived the frozen mountains. Some said it was luck. Others said it was trickery. But a few, mostly the younger soldiers who had seen the footage, said it was something else. Something they did not understand. High General Drex heard the whispers too. He hated them. His plan had failed. The human was still alive. Worse, the human was now being talked about with respect. This could not continue. He needed to end this once and for all. 1 week after Taeho returned from the mountains, Drex made his move. The entire court was gathered in the throne room for a ceremony. Empress Lyris sat on her floating throne, watching her subjects with silver eyes. Taeho stood at the side, still recovering from his ordeal. His hands were bandaged. His face was thin from the cold and hunger. But he was there. Drex stepped forward and bowed to the Empress. Your Majesty, he said in a loud voice, I must speak on a matter of honor. Lyris raised an eyebrow. Speak, General, the human. Drex pointed at Tahoe. He has brought shame to our empire. He is weak. He is unworthy. He should not stand beside our Empress as her consort. I challenge him to a trial of dominion. The room went silent. The trial of dominion was an ancient Valoran tradition. It was a fight to submission or death. It was used to settle disputes of honor between warriors. No one could refuse without being branded a coward. Empress Lyris's face showed no emotion, but her hands tightened on her throne. General Drex, she said carefully, the human is not a warrior. This challenge is not appropriate. With respect, Your Majesty, he claims to represent a warrior species. Drex smiled coldly. Let him prove it. If he refuses, it shows that humans are cowards. The alliance will be meaningless. Earth will have no place in the Galactic Accord. It was a trap. Everyone knew it. If Tahoe refused, Earth would be humiliated. If he accepted, he would die. Drex was the strongest warrior in the Empire. He had killed 100 enemies in combat. No human could defeat him. Lyris looked at Tahoe. For a moment, something passed between them. A question. A warning. Tahoe stepped forward. I accept the challenge, he said quietly. Gasps filled the room. Drex's smile grew wider. He had one. Tomorrow at dawn, the general said. In the grand arena, I will show the galaxy what humans truly are. That night, Empress Lyris came to Tahoe's chambers. It was the first time she had visited him there. She stood in the doorway, her glowing blue skin pale in the dim light. You will die tomorrow, she said. There was no cruelty in her voice, only truth. Tahoe was sitting by the window, looking at the twin moons. Perhaps. Drex is the strongest warrior in my empire. He has killed creatures twice his size. His speed is beyond what your eyes can follow. You have no chance. Tahoe turned to look at her. Your Majesty, may I tell you something about humans? She hesitated, then nodded. On Earth, we have a saying. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. He smiled softly. I have been falling my whole life. I am still standing. Lyris stared at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she left. Dawn came too quickly. The grand arena was filled with thousands of Valorans. They had come to watch the human die. Screens floated in the air, broadcasting the fight across the empire. Billions would witness this moment. Tahoe walked onto the arena floor. He wore simple training clothes. He carried no weapon. The rules of the trial allowed only bare hands. Drex stood waiting. His armor was gone, replaced by fighting clothes that showed his powerful body. His muscles were like carved stone. His silver eyes burned with hatred. Human, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Any last words? Tahoe looked around the arena. At the crowds. At the cameras. At Empress Lyris, sitting on her throne above. Just one, he said. Watch closely. The fight began. Drex moved like lightning. His first punch would have killed a normal human. But Tahoe had already moved. Years of military training had taught him to read body language. He saw the attack coming before it happened. The punch missed. Drex's eyes widened in surprise. He attacked again. And again. Each time, Tahoe moved just enough to avoid the blow, but he could not avoid everything. Drex was too fast. A kick caught Tahoe in the ribs. He heard something crack. Pain exploded through his body. He fell to the ground. The crowd cheered. It was over, but Tahoe stood up. Drex attacked again. Another blow. Another crack of bone. Tahoe fell again and stood up again. This happened 5 times. 10 times. 20 times. Each time Drex knocked him down. Each time Tahoe rose. The crowd grew quiet. Something was wrong. The human should be dead. His body was broken. Blood covered his face. But he kept standing. Why won't you stay down? Drex screamed. He was breathing hard now. His attacks were growing slower. Fighting took energy, even for Valorans. Teho spat blood and smiled. Because I am human, fight continued. Hours passed. The twin suns moved across the sky. Drex's movements became sluggish. His punches lost their power. He had never fought this long. Valorans won quickly or not at all. They were not built for endurance, but humans were. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters. They chased prey for days until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies were designed for one thing above all else. To keep going, Drex threw another punch. It was weak, tired. Teho caught his arm, twisted it, and struck him in the throat with a precise blow. A technique from his military training. The general's eyes went wide. He gasped for air. His legs buckled. Drex fell. Silence filled the arena. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Teho stood over the fallen general, swaying on broken legs. His body was destroyed. His bones were shattered. But he was standing. Empress Lyris rose from her throne. Every eye in the arena followed her as she descended to the arena floor. She walked past the fallen Drex without looking at him. She stopped in front of Teho. The human looked at her through swollen eyes. Blood dripped from his face. He could barely stand. But he did not fall. Slowly, Empress Lyris lowered her head. The Empress of 1,000 worlds was bowing to a human. I was wrong about your species, she said softly, so only he could hear. You are not weak. You are the strongest beings I have ever seen. Then Teho collapsed. But this time, it was Lyris who caught him before he hit the ground and across the galaxy. Billions of Valorans sat in stunned silence. Trying to understand what they had just witnessed, the human had won. Teho woke up in the Palace Medical Center again. This time his body was wrapped in strange glowing bandages. Machines hummed around him, sending healing energy into his broken bones. A Valoran doctor told him he should have died 10 times during the fight. His skeleton was shattered. His organs were bruised. His blood had lost half its volume, but he was alive. And he was healing. The first visitor was Captain Yunhana. She walked into the room with tears in her eyes and punched his shoulder gently. You idiot, she said. You beautiful, crazy idiot. Do you know what you have done? Teho smiled weakly. Want to fight? You changed everything? Hana sat beside his bed. The entire galaxy watched you refuse to die. Every species in the Accord is talking about humans now. They are not laughing anymore. They are afraid. Teho closed his eyes. I did not fight to make them afraid. I know. Hana took his hand. But that is what happened. And Earth is safer because of it. High General Drex was put on trial the next day. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He had abandoned the Emperor Consort in the Frozen Mountains. He had challenged him to combat with the clear intention of murder. He had plotted against the Alliance for months. Empress Lyris sat on her throne and listened to the evidence with a face of stone. When it was done, she spoke only 5 words. Gessel him to the outer reaches. Drex was stripped of his rank and sent to the most distant corner of the Empire. A cold, empty world where he would live out his days in shame. It was a punishment worse than death for a proud Valoran warrior. As the guards dragged him away, Drex looked at Teho with pure hatred, but he said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The weeks that followed were different. Teho noticed the change immediately. Courtiers who had ignored him now bowed when he passed. Soldiers who had mocked him now looked at him with respect. Servants who had been distant now smiled and spoke to him freely. Mira visited him every day during his recovery. She brought him food and told him stories about the palace. She was no longer afraid to call him her friend. But the biggest change was Empress Lyris. She came to see him often. At first, she said it was duty. She needed to check on the recovery of her consort. But the visits grew longer. She started asking questions. Real questions. She wanted to know about Earth, about human history, about the wars they had fought and the disasters they had survived. Teho told her everything. He told her about the ice ages that had nearly killed their species. He told her about the plagues that had wiped out millions. He He told her about the world wars that had burned across their planet. And after all that destruction, you kept going? Lyris asked one evening. They were sitting in her private garden, surrounded by glowing flowers. We had no choice, Teho replied. Survival is in our blood. We cannot give up. Even when everything is lost, there is always a voice inside us that says, keep fighting. Lyris was quiet for a long moment. The Valoran Empire is dying, she finally said. Teho looked at her carefully. What do you mean? We have grown soft, comfortable. We have not faced a real challenge in centuries. Our enemies are gathering. The Crixian Federation has been building its forces. They will attack within a year, and I am not sure we can win. This was a secret she had never shared with anyone. Teho understood the weight of that trust. Then we will help you, he said simply. How? Your technology is generations behind ours. Your armies are small. What can humans do? Teho smiled. We can teach you how to lose, Lyris blinked. What? Valorans have never lost? You do not know how to fight when things go wrong. You do not know how to keep going when the battle seems hopeless. Teho leaned forward. Humans lose all the time. We lose battles. We lose wars. We lose everything. And then we come back and win anyway. That is what we can teach you. The next months changed the Valoran Empire forever. Human military advisors came to Valora Prime. They trained with Valoran soldiers. They taught them strange tactics that seemed like madness. Retreat and regroup. Hit and run. Guerrilla warfare. Psychological operations. The Valorans were confused at first. These were not honorable tactics. This was not how warriors fought, but Teho showed them the results. He showed them how small human forces had defeated larger enemies throughout history. He showed them how farmers with simple weapons had driven back professional armies. He showed them the power of never giving up. Slowly, the Valorans began to understand. When the Crixian Federation finally attacked, they expected an easy victory. The Valoran Empire was weak. Their warriors were soft. The war would be over in months. They were wrong. The Valoran forces fought differently now. They did not stand and die in hopeless battles. They retreated and regrouped. They attacked supply lines. They used the terrain. They fought dirty. And when they were beaten, they did not surrender. They came back again and again and again. The war lasted 2 years. The Crixians advanced slowly, paying for every inch with blood. Their generals became frustrated. Their soldiers became exhausted. They had never faced an enemy that refused to break. In the end, the Crixians withdrew. They had won many battles, but they could not win the war. The cost was too high. The Valoran Empire remained standing. On the day the peace treaty was signed, Empress Lyra stood on the balcony of her palace with Teho beside her. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I once thought humans were weak, she said quietly. I thought your small bodies and short lives made you inferior. Teho watched the sunset. And now? Now I understand that strength is not about muscles or technology. It is about will. The will to stand up when you fall. The will to keep fighting when all hope is gone. She turned to face him. Humans are not weak. They are the strongest species in the galaxy. She took his hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. The cold Empress who had despised him was gone. In her place was a partner. Perhaps something more. What happens now? Teho asked. Lyra smiled. It was the first real smile he had ever seen on her face. Now we build something new. Together. Across the galaxy, word spread of the human who had married an empress and taught an empire to never surrender. Other species began to look at humanity differently. The small creatures from the harsh world were not prey. They were survivors. They were fighters. They were human. And in the end, that was enough. Teho looked at Lyris and felt something he had not felt in a long time. Peace. He was far from home. He was surrounded by aliens who had once despised him. He had nearly died a dozen times. But he was standing. He was alive. And he was not alone. That was what humans did. They survived. They endured. They found a way forward, no matter what, always.